In this episode of the introduction to fly tying, we are going to transition away from describing the life cycle of certain insects or providing some history of the different fly patterns and focus more on the tying itself. Today's video, or episode 4, we are going to be tying the Frenchie pattern, and there will also be a bonus fly pattern after we have tied the Frenchie. To tie the Frenchie, I'm going to be using pheasant tail, a brightly colored dubbing. In this case, it's hairline ice dub UV fluorescent hot pink. I'm going to be using size 70 UTC ultra thread. I'm going to be adding weight with 0.01 size lead wire and creating a rib with fine silver wire. First thing we do is add 8 to 10 wraps of lead wire to the shank of the hook. And we want to position this about 2 or 3 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. We're going to start our thread directly behind the lead wire and capture the tag end. And build up a thread dam behind the lead wire. Now I'm going to hold the lead wire in place and advance my thread forward to in front of the lead wire. And I'm going to do the same thing, build up a thread dam in front of the wire. With both thread dams built up, we're going to tie in the lead wire with open spirals forwards and back to really secure it in. Once it is secured in, we're going to advance our thread back until it's even with the barb of the hook. Now we're going to take our pheasant tail and select 6 to 8 fibers and pull them 90 degrees from the quill, and this will help align the tips. Then after it's aligned, remove them from the quill. The tail section of this fly will be made from material approximately 3/4 the length of the shank of the hook. And we're going to tie that in where we stopped our thread. After 2 or 3 wraps, take your thread underneath the tail fibers and then give it a gentle pull forward to help lift and splay the tail. And then secure that with a couple wraps. Now we're going to take our silver wire and we're going to go ahead and tie it in while holding the remaining pheasant tail fibers up out of the way. Once that is tied in, advance your thread forward to about halfway of the lead wraps we placed. And we're going to take the pheasant tail material and we're going to begin wrapping it from the tail forward with touching wraps to create the body of the fly. And we bring that all the way forward to where our thread is, and then tie off the material. At this point, we can trim the excess material and remove it. Now, we wrapped the pheasant tail in the same direction as the thread. So the silver wire we are going to counter wrap, or wrap in the opposite direction. I like to take one full wrap at the base of the body and then come forward with evenly spaced wraps, reinforcing the pheasant tail and creating the ribs of the body. When I come up to the thread with the silver wire, I'm going to take my thread around the wire, but still keep it below the shank of the hook, which will change the direction of the thread wraps. After 2 or 3 wraps, pull the silver wire down again and wrap your thread around the silver wire, staying below the shank of the hook. And this will reverse our thread wraps back to the original direction. Apply a little bit of pressure down on your thread and helicopter off the excess wire. Now we're going to take our thread back to where the silver wire and the body end. I'm going to apply a small amount of wax to my thread and take a small amount of the dubbing material, creating a dubbing noodle onto the thread. Once that is captured with a couple wraps, I can tighten up the dubbing noodle and build up a colorful thorax to the fly, ending just behind the eye of the hook. Tie that material in, and at this point we are ready to whip finish. Once the whip finish is complete, cut or trim your thread, and you can clean up any of these long fibers that remain. Apply a drop of head cement to the threads. And you have just tied a Frenchie nymph pattern. The bonus fly in this episode is changing the Frenchie to a complete pheasant tail nymph. In the vise I have the same size 12 mustang nymph hook. Materials will remain the same, except we're going to replace the colorful dubbing of the Frenchie with about 3 pieces of peacock herl and additional pheasant tail fibers. Just like on the Frenchie, we're going to add weight with lead wire, the same lead wire as before. And tie it in as before. Advance our thread back till it's even with the barb of the hook. Again, we are going to select 6 to 8 fibers of the pheasant tail, pull it 90 degrees to the quill like before, aligning the tips, and remove them from the quill. Size of the tail will remain the same, approximately 3/4 the length of the shank. And tie them in. Tie in our silver wire again. And advance our thread about halfway of the lead wire. Just like before, take the excess pheasant tail fibers and wrap the body forward. And tie in the materials with your thread. Take the silver wire and counter wrap it forward. And capture it and reverse the direction of your thread. After you tie it in, reverse the direction of your thread again, and we can helicopter off the excess. The back half of the pheasant tail fly or nymph is exactly the same as the Frenchie. However, at this point we're going to change it and select about 6 more fibers of your pheasant tail. In the same fashion, pulling it 90 degrees to align the tips, and then remove the excess. Now we want to measure the length of our pheasant tail from behind the eye of the hook to about the bend of the hook in length. And we're going to tie this on top of the fly. At this point we can remove the excess and grab our peacock curl. When I deal with peacock curl, I align the butts of the hurls and then trim the brittle tips to the same length. With the tips trimmed to the same length, I'm going to tie those in front of the pheasant tail fibers we just tied in, and advance my thread to behind the eye of the hook. I usually put some wraps in the peacock curl to make them a little stronger when wrapping. With them twisted on themselves, I take touching wraps forward, building up a thorax. And then take my thread and capture the peacock curl. Once that's captured, one peacock curl at a time, I can just break off. Now the peacock curl we just tied in, we're going to gather it up and pull it forward over the back of the peacock curl. Take our thumb and spread it out, flatten it out. And then tie it in behind the eye of the hook. With your thumbnail, push the remaining fibers back and splay them. Try to get an even number of fibers on each side of the fly, and then secure those in place. With the legs pushed back and secured in place, we can go ahead and whip finish. and trim our thread. A little bit of head cement on the thread wraps. You can also put head cement on the thorax or the wing case. And you just changed the Frenchie into a complete pheasant tail nymph.